Thank you, Emma, and thanks everybody for coming out on this nice day. As Emma noted, it's my first State of the City. I want to introduce two of our city councilors who are here. Council President Robert Massey here, and Councilor Rebecca Stavengord here. And we have a number of city staff in the audience, and some of them may get mentioned at various points in this. I do want to point out there's a lot of literature out on the table, so afterwards please do stop by the table and see if it answers any questions that I might have raised or other questions that I didn't get to that you might have. The last 6 to 7 years has been an exciting time of growth for Milwaukie after a long period of little growth. We're now in a time of transition because our city manager left earlier this spring, and our police chief retired, and she left to go take a new challenge over in Washington County. And our police chief retired, but luckily for us, Anne left us with a really good team. She spent a lot of time over her 7+ years building a great team here in town, and so we're in good hands with Emma as our acting city manager, and Joseph Brilio, who was here somewhere, back there, as our acting acting assistant city manager. And we got through our budget, which was a big, and it was a big lift for, people relatively new to the job, a relatively new finance director, et cetera, to pull off, but they did a lovely job. So as an overview, I like to think of Milwaukie as a work in progress. There's lots of good stuff happening, and I'm going to start out with some stuff to celebrate, some stuff to look forward to, and then some of the challenges that we face. So I will start out first with things to celebrate. And the first one I added just today, and it's not one the city gets any credit for, frankly, but it's the reaching of an agreement between the North Clackamas School District and the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District to keep the Wichita Center in our community. They issued a press release about this time yesterday saying they had an agreement in principle, and it looks like the facility will go back to the school district and the services will continue, and that's vitally important for our community. That's a place that serves a lot of families in our community, so that was great news. Going to the things that are more city projects. You're sitting in one. Our new city hall, we moved in here in October. It was several years in the making. We knew Advantis was leaving, and the city bought it and rented it back to Advantis, and then it took about, the better part of a year to refit it for city purposes. But it's been a great addition to the city because it allowed us to bring staff from 2 facilities that were spread out around town and have them all under one roof. It also allowed for you guys, for residents, to have sort of more one-stop shopping. There are a few little things like tree permits, I think, and erosion control permits where you still have to go out to Johnson Creek, but most everything else is here on the 3rd floor. It's where you pay tickets if you get them. It's where you pay your utility if you want to bring in a check. It's where you ask questions of the planners, the engineers, the building team, etc. So it's all under one roof now. And it's great. I think it's really, turned out to be a lovely facility. And Joseph over there with the camera gets a lot of the credit, but there were other people too who helped with making this a reality. Other things to celebrate: new seasons, bringing new life to Milwaukie Marketplace. Milwaukie Marketplace was really looking pretty grim about 5 years ago, but once we got the news, new seasons was coming in, then we got Planet Fitness, we got Luna's Ice Cream, which I want to give a shout out to Luna's. I go there more than I should. And now we have a brand new Ace Hardware this week. So it's really nice to see new life coming back into Milwaukie Marketplace. There's still a few spaces for rent there, but I feel confident that with all the new traffic, it will fill up pretty fast. Downtown, new apartments right here. We can kind of see them out the window. They've just started leasing 180 new apartments at Henley Place. Of course, the Axle Tree building, which opened in 2019, down at the other end of downtown. So bringing people into downtown, I think, is important to revitalizing the businesses downtown as well. And we have seen some of that. Just some of the new businesses recently are spoken word books here on Main Street, which people really love. And she's got a great following already, and she does a lot of cool activities. And then there's a new vintage shop back by the food cart pod called That One Vintage. I have to say, it's a cute little shop. I went in there and she told me that she specialized in Y2K vintage, and I was like, oh, that's about half of my closet, okay. Maybe it's time to take it out and see if I can get upscale prices for it now. And right across the street here, I think we're going to have a new gym one of these days. It's been taking a while, but O'Malley's Gym is like a weightlifters kind of, bodybuilders kind of gym. And I think they're supposed to open soon. Outside of downtown, we've completed a lot of sidewalk projects. Sidewalk and bike pedestrian paths. And actually, Nicole Perry's sitting here, and I had written down Linwood. I want to call out 3 of them that have been kind of the most recent ones. Linwood Avenue, 43rd Avenue, and Home Avenue. But Linwood and Nicole and a few other parents who were active in the PTO back about 10 years ago are really the reason we have the SAFE program. They really were quite activist in coming to council and saying it's ridiculous, our kids cannot walk to school, they cannot bike to school, they cannot safely cross Linwood Avenue. They really sort of, the city council, if you look back at city council goals going back to 2008 or maybe even longer, you'll see like more sidewalks, but nothing was being done to actually come up with the funding to build more sidewalks. And I think it was the call from the people in Linwood that really sort of brought it to the front burner, got us thinking about safe routes to school, got us thinking about how do we fund building, safer. And so the SAFE program, for those who don't know, SAFE is Safe Access for Everyone. It's sort of built around both safe routes to school ideas, but also the American with Disabilities Act and our obligation to make places more accessible for everyone. So it's a list of priority projects, and so those are the ones we've finished recently. I'll come back around in a little bit to ones that we're working on now. One thing I wanted to call out too was that we just passed our budget earlier this week. We are holding our utility rates essentially steady. One of them's going up 1% and another one's going down 1%, and the SAFE fee is adjusted to consumer price index. But basically, if you compare them all, we're holding them pretty much steady. A lot of communities around us cannot say that. I don't know if people know people in Oak Grove, but they've had a huge increase in their water and sewer and stormwater bill because of infrastructure expenses they need to meet. Canby, Sandy, a lot of cities are facing double-digit increases. So we're really fortunate that, and I would attribute it both to our team internally, our public works team and engineering team that have, scoped what projects we can do, both with the manpower we have and the money we have. But also, I would call out Water and Environment Services, who's our sewer processor, as you will, the county agency that runs the sewer plant. They did a lot of investing about 10 years ago, and people who've been around that long probably remember we had some big increases like 10 years ago, but they had the foresight and they built it before our big high inflationary times we're in now, and we're reaping the benefit of that. So it's nice to have a 2-year cycle where we don't intend to raise utility rates. Another exciting thing that's just kind of happening is Leading Library is going to be a cooling center this summer. So we have not had an after hours kind of cooling center in Milwaukie. I mean, the library and the Milwaukie Community Center have always been places where people can go get out of the heat on a hot day, but the community center closes at 5. The library closes different hours, different days, but none of them were open like until after dark when the temps start coming down. So I'm really happy to know that we'll have that option for people to come to the Leading Library. It will be open on the days when it's activated as a cooling center, which is sort of days over 90. It will be open until 10 p.m. We'll have people, staff, and volunteers, I think some of the city councilors included, who'll be volunteering to help staff that. And finally, we had 3 goals. If you look at other cities' goals, and if you look at Milwaukie goals before the last 6 or 7 years, they'll have long lists of 8 or 10 goals or 12 goals and not necessarily make progress on all of them. And one of the things that Ann Ober brought here as city manager was the idea of tying the goal, saying, okay, you can only have 3 goals because I'm tying those to money. I'm tying those to some capacity in the city to actually move them forward. And so there were times I didn't like being limited to 3 goals, but it was the right move, and it has made for progress. And so our 3 goals have been, for the last few years, climate, equity, and parks. So on the climate goal, we are now a city that just a couple of the accomplishments, and I'm not going to try and list them all, but the electricity we use in city facilities is all renewable electricity. We are installing EV chargers both for city vehicle usage, because we are expanding our number of EVs in our fleet, but also public chargers like the one in front of the library. And we have a new solar installation coming to the Johnson Creek campus, and we can thank Representative and former Mayor Mark Gamma for that. He got us some state money to make that possible. On the equity goal, we developed a multi-year equity work plan, and just in the next month, maybe even sooner than a month, we are launching a community event fund that will be overseen by our equity steering committee. And the idea there is a grant fund to incentivize or to help groups and people who want to put on multicultural events, whether that's music, whether it's a class, whatever it may be. They're pretty flexible about the kind of things you can put in, and watch for an application and an announcement of that program in the coming weeks. And parks. So I'm going to talk about parks more later, but it's a good segue to me for me to what's coming in the next year, because what's coming in the next year is a park right there. And 2 other parks. 3 parks are set to open in October, and for those we can thank former city councilor, former rep Karin Power, and our state senator Kathleen Taylor, who helped us get ARPA money that is building those 3 parks. We, as I mentioned, just passed the budget. So part of that budget was the one increase in that, I don't want to say the one increase, but the significant increase in that budget was a fee, an increase in the right-of-way fee charged to our electric and gas utilities. And with that money, we are able to stabilize our budget. We are in a hold the line budget, which really meant every department could not increase its budget, which, given the inflation we have, we know that means a budget decrease for the departments. But the other thing that right-of-way surcharge gives us is the ability to institutionalize our climate and equity goals. Climate and equity are things we'll be needing to keep in our work forever as a city. We're not going to be able to click the box and say it's done, it's fixed. It's many years away before anybody would be able to do that. So the goal was to incorporate those goals into the city budget, into the city's work plans, et cetera, to free us up to have a couple new goals. And we will probably be having that discussion late this year or early next year. Hillside Park. So Hillside Park is finally going to break ground. Some of you maybe were around when they started discussions and planning, which was about 2018. But it's finally breaking ground now. That is going to create, that is over on 32nd Avenue near the hospital. There's 100 units of old cottages which date from World War II, if not before. And those are coming down, and in the place of 100 cottages, there's going to be housing for 500. There's going to be 500 units of housing. The first phase is 275 units, and that's breaking ground in October. So it's really great to see that. That's a complex owned and operated by the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, and they've been great partners in meeting with the neighborhoods and really being transparent about their planning and all of that for Hillside. So it's great to see that moving forward. Monroe Greenway. We started talking about Monroe Greenway 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure the task force for that began in 2014. It's finally going to get started being built. We've had the money for a couple of years, but it's all money that came with a lot of strings, and we're kind of getting into the design phase now. And you'll start seeing the Monroe Greenway coming to fruition in 2025. It's going to happen in phases, so it's not going to all happen in one fell swoop, but watch for that. Highway 224 is getting repaved. That's ODOT's project, but as part of that, they are going to reconfigure the Monroe intersection. As part of the Monroe Greenway, calls for a narrowing and an easier, safer crossing at Monroe. So we will see some work from ODOT to accomplish that at the Monroe intersection as part of the 224 repaving. And also at that same intersection, there's this old YWCA daycare that's been shuttered since COVID. Well, I'm happy to report that the Clackamas County Children's Coalition, which is a Head Start provider, got funding from the state legislature and will be opening that as a new Head Start program here in Milwaukie. Not sure at the timeline for that, but that is definitely a welcome addition. We need more childcare opportunities for people. Campbell Elementary, that's been shuttered for like a decade, and that's going to be the new home of Cascade Heights Charter School. So I think people are generally happy to see the school back getting some use. I mentioned this cooling shelter at the library. We also are in talks with a downtown congregation about a potential warming shelter in the winter months. There's still a lot to be worked out on that, but I'm hopeful that we'll have a warming shelter here in town, because traditionally we've had to send people or take people to Oregon City for a warming shelter on those coldest nights. So I'm hopeful that we will have that option here in town. For those of you who live in Ardenwald, there's a thing called the Meek Street Project. And if you live in Ardenwald near the railroad tracks, you know, because they plowed down a bunch of brush this spring and they've been doing construction out there. But that is a new stormwater facility to create a new detention pond kind of at the end of Balfour Street to improve our stormwater treatment and our capacity for stormwater in that whole side of the Ardenwald neighborhood and in central Milwaukie. That was actually part of, there's also a stormwater pond that was built sort of near the public safety building, and there are really two ends of the same project, but this one took longer because it's hard to deal with the railroads sometimes. Let's see, what else? Downtown, I think downtown, even just in the next year, could see a lot of transformation. By next spring, the historic City Hall will open with free brewing, which everybody's excited about, a bakery and a coffee shop. We have another building just changed hands, and it looks like they are looking to sort of divide up some spaces and rent them for eateries. We know that Libby's and Chase Bank are both up for sale. Who knows what will happen with those? And then right next door here, the Peak Funeral Home was knocked down last year, and there's a proposal in, I believe it's going to the Planning Commission next week, for a food cart pod, one of the posh, fancy ones like they have in Westland and Oregon City, with the tap room and the covered shelter and all of that. So all of those things, together with the new 180 new units here, I do think we could see a real change in the energy level on Main Street over the next year. So I'm pretty excited about that. We'll also be doing the first expenditures from our urban renewal program in the next year. So back in 2016, I think, I was a newbie counselor, and I was the one assigned to the urban renewal study and the working group. And so we created an urban renewal district, which includes downtown and what we call central Milwaukie. So basically from Hillside through Milwaukie Marketplace on that side of 224. So those areas are areas where we can use urban renewal dollars. It takes a while for urban renewal dollars to build up, but we're finally to the point where we have some to spend. And so I think you will see both two kinds of projects in the next year, some infrastructure, some smaller infrastructure projects, as well as some new programs to support small businesses in our community. So like storefront improvement grants, grants for specialized equipment that somebody might need, grants to help people getting started in a new business. So that's an exciting development. And then Three Herons. Has anybody heard about Three Herons? No? Oh, I got one nod. Well, and I know Scott does, because Scott's been working on it. So I'm going to talk about Milwaukie Bay Park in a minute, and sort of the stalemate we're in with Clackamas County over that. But the one ray of sunshine when it comes to Milwaukie Bay Park is that we are moving forward with an agreement with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde to do an art project, an ongoing art piece for Milwaukie Bay Park, the Three Herons. And the idea is to put in 3 plinths or 3 bases for sculptures, and that every year they would provide different sculptures. They would have their own sculpture contest and provide different sculptures of herons. And it would be timed for the spring arrival of salmon up the river. So the herons coming for the salmon in the salmon run. So there's a lot of details still to be worked out, but I'm told we will see a oh my goodness, he told me I had 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm told we'll see an agreement come to City Council soon. The last thing on my shout out list is paving, 6.6 miles of slurry sealing and 3 miles of new paving in neighborhood streets this summer. I will not go into my long-winded explanation of what slurry sealing is, but you can see me afterwards. The thing coming down the pike, not this year, but in a few years, that is one of the most exciting things for me, is the removal of Kellogg Dam. 5 years ago, I did not think there was much chance of it happening. ODOT was not that interested in rebuilding the bridge. It was just such a daunting project that I really didn't see it happening. And yet, when the federal government put out infrastructure funding, it suddenly became a real possibility. We got $15 million with a group of partners. We got $15 million from NOAA to design the new bridge, to design what the creek would look like once the lake is gone, how it properly would serve fish passage. And they're interested in it not just because of the 17 miles of fish passage up Kellogg and Mount Scott Creeks, but also because of it being rearing habitat for juvenile salmon. That's one of the big needs, is the juvenile salmon coming from the Clackamas River and elsewhere need places to rest and feed and fatten as they make their way out to the sea. And so the fish people are really very, excited about the opportunity to remove Kellogg Dam. And also a whole list of other partners, which I won't list because I said I was going to get you out here by 5. Housing. I'm going to read this part. The growth in businesses is tied with the growth in housing and number of residents. In the decade between 2017 and 2026, we are on track to see 2,000 new housing units, mostly apartments, but also a few hundred new single-family homes and middle housing units. This is an increase of almost 23% over the 8,800 housing units in Milwaukee in 2016. How much of that housing is affordable? The 400 new units at Hillside, 28 units at Northwest Housing Alternatives, which is the campus right by the light rail station, and 23 new units to come in the Cohoe Point development. But hopefully we will see some townhome and cottage cluster developments that will create home ownership opportunities at price points below the current $500,000 median price for single family homes, so that younger generations of Milwaukeeans can afford to stay here. But more housing also brings more demand for services, more traffic, and more parking conflicts. So I'm going to briefly touch on challenges, and I'm probably going to break my pledge to get you out here by 5. But challenges. We're going into a very tight 2-year budget, as I said, this hold the line budget. I have heard since I got on council that, there's this fiscal cliff we're going to go off of. And it all has to do with the way Oregon's property tax, measures 5 and 50 that were enacted in the 1990s, and sort of how it's hamstrung. And if you just watch other cities, everybody's struggling. Gresham had a bond measure this election cycle to fund police and fire services. I heard the mayor of Beaverton say they're $10 million. They're going to have a $10 million shortfall, et cetera. So that looming fiscal cliff is close now. It really is something we're going to have to address before the next budget. In the next 2 years, before we go into the next budget cycle, we really have to have some tough conversations about revenue and about, or else cutting city services and staffing. We also need to invest in our water system. Both to create more capacity. We've been told we need another reservoir, but also there's a lot of new regulations coming down about chemicals, these PFAS chemicals you've probably read about. So there's going to need to be some investment there. Parks, I'm going to shortcut what I expected to talk 5 minutes about parks, but we are at a stalemate with North Clackamas, with the Board of County Commissioners. They could finish this park. We had a deal in 2019. We had a budget. We thought we had a deal. We were paying some. They were paying some. There were some state grants paying some. Well, those state grants are about to expire. $1.75 million in state grants is going to expire this summer, and there's no end in sight to the stalemate. They could build this park. Their rationale is, well, we don't want to build a park if Milwaukee leaves. Well, we offered a term that said if we leave the district and if we ever treat anybody differently from Milwaukee residents, meaning if we try to charge out of non-Milwaukee residents or we try to treat them differently in terms of access to the park, we would repay their investment. So there was no risk to them to go forward and build that park. And yet here we sit 3 years later, after 3 years of delays by the Board of County Commissioners. Parking, I'm not going to talk about it, but parking conflicts downtown and in the neighborhoods, I think, are going to be an issue out of all the growth we're seeing. Okay, I had a long thing I wanted to say about public engagement. I do want to quote, there was an article about Mike's Drive-In reopening, and one of the managers there said, people are quite invested in Milwaukie. And I was like, yes, true. Now, she met in Milwaukie, Mike's Drive-In, but I think that's I do think people are quite invested in Milwaukie. I see it from both longtime residents who are kind of the backbone of our Milwaukie Museum and our Rotary and our community emergency response team, but also new people. I just did interviews for our boards and commissions, and there were a lot of applicants who've only lived here a year or two, and it was great to see them getting so engaged in the city. So I'm going to shortcut the rest of this and say there is a sign up, fireworks. We're coming up on 4th of July. We're going to have new fireworks signs. So if you want a fireworks sign to remind your neighbors that it is illegal to use fireworks in the city of Milwaukie, please sign up out there and I'll see that you get a lawn sign. And, look forward to seeing everybody at all the fun summer events we have in Milwaukie. First Friday tonight, but summer concerts, Juneteenth, a week from tomorrow. Pride, 3 weeks from tomorrow. August summer concerts in Ardenwald and Ball Michelle, and lots of other summer events. So I really appreciate you guys coming out today, and I will cut you loose so you can go enjoy First Friday.